I'm Raija Kemppainen from Finland, currently residing in Kuwait. I will discuss and explain the cultural dimensions we use in the field journal. But first, a few words about who I am. I received my PhD degree in education leadership in the US quite long ago. I have taught multicultural education, intercultural communication, but focused mostly on leadership in organizations and particularly on cross-cultural management. I have taught culture and done culture-related research in Estonia, the US, Finland, Saudi Arabia, and most recently in Sweden. The 6 years in Saudi was maybe my ultimate cultural experience. I loved it and I learned a lot. Let's talk about the cultural dimensions first generally, but also the dimensions used in the field journal, and particularly for the inner circle of the GEA impact circles. I have observed during my years in the field different schools of thought or thinking about cultural dimensions. One being that we identify culture phenomena, name them, model them, and use them in research or teaching as they serve our purpose. Or the other option would be to ignore the cultural dimensions to avoid stereotyping. After Hofstede's original research already in the late 60s, early 70s, done at IBM, the dimensions that were identified at the research were used everywhere. When I was teaching culture 30 years ago, that's what I used. But then I started rejecting these dimensions to a certain degree, maybe somewhat influenced with postmodernist view. In other words, denying the existence of objective reality, claiming that knowledge is constructed through dialogue, and therefore knowledge can vary. But I have turned halfway back, or even maybe more so back. I will explain. In academia, there of course is criticism and dialogue, debates, and for example, Hofstede's dimensions have been criticized. Some of the criticism regards methods used, for example, how representative the sample was, or another concern has been the culture being perceived as static. But we know there are other theorists who have come to same type of conclusions or categorizations. Whether Hofstede or others, it is about how the dimensions are used. Well, there are studies, some studies that have noticed that culture training can increase stereotypes. That sounds dangerous. I believe it can happen if it's poorly done. So the other option would be to ignore using the cultural dimensions. But what would happen? That would leave us without ability to talk about cultural phenomena by name. I believe that we need to identify phenomena and name them to be able to talk about them. But how to reconcile then this tension? In my mind, the problem has been in simplifying the dimensions, associating certain behaviors with certain geographic region, typically a country. And notice, country here is often used as a proxy for culture, and that's too simple. We know it's more complex. But this type of approach can lead to stereotypical views. Yet another problem with that I see is that the entity we try to understand, for example, one country or nation, is that it has levels, several levels of culture: individual, professional, organizational, and so on. So individuals or organizations within a country can be very distinct with their unique culture makeup. But if research utilizing a large set of data has been able to identify cultural dimensions or cultural behavior, to me that itself is a value. Professors, trainers of culture, teachers of culture, they do use the dimensions to help us make sense out of the world or the environment. And in a new environment, such clues can be the first help to observe what's going on in a new setting. And then we can ourselves observe what's going on. But here in our journal, we use the dimensions safely. We don't try to, to not associate certain cultural dimensions with a country or a geographic region, but instead we try to understand cultural phenomena generally, and more particularly and importantly, try to identify our own cultural identity, how we see the world, and how we think, what our thinking patterns are. So what we have done, we have for this journal and in selecting the dimensions. So we selected some of the most commonly used dimensions, like Hofstede and Globe Project. You may not have heard about Globe projects before. It's a highly recognized and widely used globally tool in organizations, which actually is built on Hofstede, so therefore there is a heavy overlap between these two sets. And we have merged these two sets and utilized the overlap. From Hofstede, we used the original 4 dimensions: power distance, encouraging or endorsing authority, uncertainty avoidance, tolerating or not tolerating ambiguity, individualism, independence or interdependence, and masculinity. However, here we call masculinity humane orientation, having compassion and sympathy, because of the loaded nature of the term masculine. And humane orientation, actually, as we use it, has overlap with Globe Project's dimension describing one side of masculine-feminine scale. And we have added 2 dimensions from Globe Project, one being performance orientation, encouragement of performance improvement, and the second is future orientation, investment in the future. And these dimensions are quite relevant in the schoolwork or in community development. So let's talk about the evaluation you're about to take. You will evaluate yourselves on or actually reflect on the selected cultural dimensions and models. There are two parts to the questionnaire, one on the inner circle, one on the outer circle. The outer circle we'll talk about later. So now we focus on the inner circle. In other words, me, my classroom, my school or wider community. And the inner circle dimensions we have actually now discussed quite a bit in length are dimensions from Hofstede and Globe project. And again, here they are. Performance orientation, human orientation, power distance, uncertainty, avoidance, individualism, and masculine, or rather humane orientation. And what we highly wish is that you enjoy this process. Enjoy working with the question, reflecting. And based on what you find about yourselves, your classroom, your community, you will be asked to write an action plan, but focus on those actions that are most timely, pressing, relevant for you now and for your work. Enjoy.